And we wanted to hear a little bit more from each of you since it's summertime and you have great opportunity, I think, right now to think back on last school year, all the things that we experienced, some of the challenges we had, especially challenges with students, but even among staff. Um, and, summertime's a great time to reflect and think back on what we went through. And I like to always do an exercise for myself. If I could go back in time and knowing what I know now, maybe would I do something different or would I change a little bit? Um, you know, Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes there's little things that I look at that maybe I would do differently. And we wanted to kind of get just a little bit of a feel for where you are and what you are thinking about this summer as you're taking a break, decompressing, and thinking about how last school year went and what maybe you're looking at in terms of challenges moving forward. And so I want to launch a little poll or a questionnaire for you. So if you can take just a minute and kind of fill this out, we'll launch this here. Um, if you could, that should be popping up for you. Can you all see that?
Yeah, give us a thumbs up if you can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Go ahead and answer those questions. And thank you for the thumbs up on that. And then at the end, we'll give you a minute or so here to go through that. And then at the end, we will share the results with you. If you're not seeing it, I'm gonna put up a QR code here. I'm gonna stop my share for a second and share this screen right here. So here's a QR code. So if you didn't see the poll or quiz pop up in your Zoom, you can point your camera at this QR code and answer those questions as well off of your phone if you want to do something like that.
So mine, the QR code's covered up, Hans, on my screen.
Is it? You're not seeing
Yeah,
that on?
yeah, it's covered up by the quiz. It's covering the QR code.
You see it now?
No, no. I don't know if you can move over the
Yeah, I mean, I moved it.
or you can move
Well,
the
we've got a lot of people filling it out on the QR code, right? No, I mean, on the screen right now.
yeah.
I'll stop share. I'll try that one more time. We'll try it this way.
There you go.
Can you see it right there? We'll
It
try
was
that.
there for a second, then it went back under behind it. Dang it.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it's because the quiz is forcing us to do it.
Yeah.
So if the quiz is in front of it, then you don't need the QR code. So,
All right. All right.
so no worries. Um, I'll just go back to our.
All right. We're getting some good results. Yeah, thanks for filling this out, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
So it looks like most of you are about halfway through it. We'll give you another minute to finish up this, and then we'll end the poll and share our results here. All right. 20 more seconds. We'll finish up. Looks like we've got most. All right. Let's share the results here. So um, I'm not sure what you're seeing on your end, Christian. Do you see kind of just like a little window pop up?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So first question was, when you reflect on last school year, which of the following challenges did you observe in students who struggled? Um, Lack of motivation or purpose, poor attendance or chronic absenteeism was the highest. That was 67%. The other one was 63%. And these are, multiple choice here, so you could select multiple ones. Many of you said difficulty regulating emotions or behavior, low engagement in class activities, lack of connection with peers or adults, and difficulty seeing the relevance of school. Next question we had was, if you could go back in time and do one thing differently to support struggling students, what would you focus on more? So a couple, some of the options we had here: building stronger relationships earlier in the year. So that was one of the higher ones. Second highest, it looks like 23%. More structured routines. And this was, you could only select one, obviously. So this is going to limit here. More structured routines and clear expectations. More individualized support and check-ins was the highest. More trauma-informed practices, 18%. More consistent parent communication, and not sure, you'd like to learn more. The next one, the third question was, which of the following would most help your school culture going into next year? A clear school-wide approach to student motivation. Looks like the highest here was a framework for addressing absenteeism and disengagement down towards the bottom, but we had more tools to support staff, student relationship building, resources to reduce staff burnout and increase morale, and a unified message that helps staff reconnect with their why. Fourth question was, how confident do you feel in the ability of your staff to build strong, positive relationships with students, especially those who are disengaged or frequently absent? Very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident. They struggle to connect with some students and they need more tools and training in this area. So good. I mean, I think somewhat confident. That's a healthy thing. I'm glad to see that. Close to half of you said that. Some feel very confident, and then down on the lower end, there's a few that recognize there's some real struggles there. Um, how much impact do you believe positive teacher-student relationships have on student engagement and attendance? So a significant impact, it's foundational, vast majority. I'm glad to see that. A moderate impact, important, but not everything. And then zeros on the last three. So clearly, I think that's an understood um, area there. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about a little bit today. Um, I'll stop sharing that. And let me introduce my friend here. I should introduce myself too. My name is Hans Magleby. Um, I am a former teacher, and I was the art director for a video game company. I have a degree in art, kind of a background in visual arts, and a lot of experience in technology and instructional design. I'm one of the founders of Why Try It, along with this other gentleman here, Christian Moore. Christian and I are old high school buddies. Our relationship goes back to our teenage years. And I met Christian between my eighth and ninth grade year in school. We became friends, and eventually became business partners in this venture we've been doing for 25 years now. And much of what we do is based on Christian's life experience. Christian is a clinical social worker. He is the author of this book, The Resilience Breakthrough. If you haven't read it, it's an amazing book, and we won't have a lot of time today to share much about that. But we do have a webinar next week where we will talk more specifically about that. If you want to join us and learn a little bit more about the resilience breakthrough and that theory of resilience that we'll talk about there. But today we were going to share a little bit more specifically about some of the strategies and resources that we follow, and much of these in the Why Try program, and another resource that we call the Transformational Leader Toolkit. It's a leadership tool for school, kind of impacting school culture and um, providing professional development resources for your staff focusing on that issue of relationships, student engagement, and helping address some of those issues of staff burnout, chronic absenteeism among students, and disengagement. And so a lot of what we do is based on Christian and his life experience. And I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself a little bit, and some of the work that he does, just to prove that our history goes back. Here's some proof. We were a little bit better looking back in those days. This is us driving around in my old Suzuki Samurai, and that was our common weekend routine, summer routine, especially when we were teenagers growing up. But I'm going to let Christian share a little bit about himself.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Christian.
we no cell phones back then, no cell phones.
That's right.
So I grew up in between DC and Baltimore during a fun time during the 80s. I think DC was the murder capital of the world at that time. You can see me in my Washington Commanders coat there. That's when the Washington Commanders used to win football games. But hey, we almost were one game shy of the Super Bowl this year. Hopefully we'll make it to the Super Bowl now. You can see the last one there. It says no hope for leaving the neighborhood. None of my friends had cars. It wasn't until I came out here to Utah, hung out with Hans, that had a friend that had a car. But my son was laughing the other day because he heard me saying, I never thought I'd get out of my neighborhood. I've been able to fly millions of miles across the country. But my son was laughing because I never thought I could get out of my neighborhood. He's like, "Are you serious about that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So my kids are growing up in a completely different world. Next picture here. Yeah, so again, I wrote this book, The Resilience Breakthrough. I wanted to know where resilience comes from internally. Is resilience something that can be taught? We definitely believe resilience is something that you can learn, it can be taught, so we're excited about that. Yeah, I did my graduate thesis looking at the impact that learning disabilities has on poverty and crime, and what role resilience plays in that. And I just wanted to know, two kids grew up in the same home, same neighborhood, same background. One kid makes it out, the other kid doesn't. What's the X factor? I saw this with some of my own family. I have five brothers, six sisters. I was able to make it out. Some of my siblings weren't. What is that X factor? And came across a longitudinal study out of Kauai. I think that's the next slide here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kauai longitudinal study, just trying to answer that question, what's the biggest X factor when you're dealing with a lot of trauma? And they found the key was resilience, challenge the myth that a child who is a member of a so-called high risk group is destined to struggle or fall short in life. And again, I saw this in my own family. I've seen this in hundreds of communities across the country. And that's why education is the most powerful thing in the world, because we do know resilience can be taught. And so we want to make sure kids have those skills of resilience. So here's my background. Here's how I got interested in the subject matter of resilience. So here's kind of a 5-6 minute version of my story here.
Yeah, like I mentioned, most of this is built on, a lot of what we do is built on Christian's story. So this is just a little background for those of you that aren't familiar with Christian and his background, and kind of how it's led to the development of the resources that we have.
I grew up in between Baltimore and DC in a family of 12 kids, 5 brothers, 6 sisters. Both my parents had some mental health challenges. My mom had social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, had a fear of leaving the house. You have to leave the house to go get food. So it wasn't a lot of food to eat sometimes in my house growing up.
Don't tell anyone, but my dad was one of the highest level code breakers at the National Security Agency. You could give my dad any mathematical problem and he could instantly rattle it off the top of his head. My dad was autistic. He was a genius, but he had very little common sense or social skills. If you've ever seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, you've met my dad.
So having 2 parents with some mental health challenges put me in a situation where I ended up being a street kid. I could hang out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a school night, had very few rules, very few boundaries. One night, I was out late at night and a car pulls up and I hear a voice, and the voice I hear is the voice of a woman who I endearingly call Mama Jackson. It was one of my best friend's moms who sees me out there, late at night.
Christian had so many obstacles that was going on in his home.
She knows what I'm out there doing, and she says, "Look, Don't you ever set foot on our property. I'm gonna call the school tomorrow. I'm gonna make sure you're not in any of Sean's classes. I remember thinking to myself, dang, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I can never go to school with him ever again.
When you see a child that's hungry, there's no happiness there. You're thinking about what other kids have that they don't have, okay? But when you see a child that's hungry and you give that child some food, you see that child's disposition change.
Going to school was very difficult for me as a child that was diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder, and severe learning disabilities. When I was sitting in a classroom, oftentimes, I was embarrassed. When I got called out loud, I would act up and get in trouble instead of embarrassing myself because I didn't know how to read or didn't know how to do basic math. So, for me, it was like going to the doctor's office every day, going to school. I had a hard time telling time. When I was even 17 years old, I couldn't tell time on a hand clock. To me, 4:45 equals 25 minutes to 5, but they tell me a quarter's 15. But how could a quarter not equal 25?
When we concentrate on that more to make sure that a child's needs are provided for, then that child will thrive. I know that I'm loved, and I know that this person is going to feed me to make sure I have what I need. One of his teachers in high school said to him that he would never go to college. Christian went to college.
Growing up in between DC and Baltimore, I saw many social problems in my community, in my neighborhood. I saw poverty, I saw hopelessness at times. I even saw some violence. But I remember walking to school one morning and literally seeing one of my best friends evicted from his house. His furniture was all throughout his front yard. I could see the heartbreak in his eyes, his parents' eyes. And I knew in that moment, I wanted to be a social worker. And I knew I could not become a social worker unless I went to college. But I was told college was probably not going to be an option for me with a 6th grade math level, a 7th grade reading and writing level. Statistically, I had a better chance of playing the NBA and becoming LeBron James.
His experience was at the other side of the track. Life was different. Life was unique. And the kids like that, they have to survive.
I struggled getting through college math. College math is a requirement to make it through school. I remember that feeling in my stomach when I knew I couldn't graduate.
They're not going to let me graduate because I can't do math. I can't count money, I can't numbers, I get confused and all of these things. He was like a bobcat in a cage.
So I came up with something called the No F game plan. And this was a strategy that I used to make it through school with my learning differences.
He made himself big. He made himself known to others. I'm here. Hey, I may not have what you have, but I have a street smart.
I would go to every class. I would sit on the front row. I would do all the homework assignments. And I would do enough extra credit to get a D-. I would shoot for A's, but I learned in college you get just as much credit with a D-.
And his paper is not polished. Other students get an A. Christian gets B, sometimes a C. But he has ideas. He has a substance. And the Why Try program that he ran with and helped incredible number of students and the teachers and administrators came out of a classwork.
He created an environment to teach teachers how to really deal with students that may have significant functional limitations.
I persevered. Luckily, I knew what resilience was. I knew how to take my academic challenges and use them as a reason to knock down barriers, to focus on what was right with me, not what was wrong with me.
The vision of Why Try And I think this thing is called the roller coaster ride. And I'm so glad that when he fell off of that roller coaster, that he got back on.
Dr. Virgil Wood, civil rights icon and close friend to Dr. Martin Luther King, learned about Why Try's impact and decided to honor Mama Jackson with the National Rosa Parks Save the Children Award. Mama Jackson gave me a safe and loving environment so I could thrive. She didn't get rid of my problems at home, at school, in my neighborhood. She showed me how to use those problems as a fuel source to put one foot in front of another and create a productive outcome with the opposition. Despite my many challenges, I was able to get a master's degree with a 6th grade math level and a 7th grade reading and writing level, and become a licensed clinical social worker. As a school social worker, I quickly noticed it was very difficult to engage students like myself, especially students coming to school with no paper, no pencil, no notebook, totally disengaged from the academic process. I noticed doing verbal cognitive intervention didn't reach many of these students. One day my colleague pointed out to me that most of the students I'm working with are visual learners, not auditory learners. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, I'm an artist. Why would I not take everything and make it visual for the student? Most of these kids are visual learners. So I decided to take evidence-based mental health practice and deliver it in visual metaphors. And I noticed once I did it in a visual metaphor, the student locked in on the visual picture. It kept them engaged. They were far more interested in what I was doing. I knew I had the student in that moment. Using visual metaphors to teach things like your decisions have consequences, how to tear off your labels, how to understand your emotions and the emotions of others. And what was really exciting to me is sometimes 2 or 3 weeks later, they could remember the details of what we did a few weeks before in counseling. And that's when I knew we had that engagement. Then we decided to reinforce the picture with music and physical activities to increase that engagement even more. We took brief solution-focused therapy, reality therapy, strength-based counseling, and combined it into a learning method that any educator or counselor could use to reach students, especially students that are having a hard time answering the question, why try?
Okay.
As you can see, I was really lucky to have Mom Jackson come into my life, those mentors you saw in the video. So again, I didn't do this in isolation. There's a whole army of people, behind me that helped us enable us to, reach over 3 million students. What I want to do now is share with you, I talked a little bit about, learning that most of these kids are visual learners. I could talk to them all day long. At the end of the hour, I'd say, what do we do today? The kid would tell me whatever I wanted to hear to get the heck out of my office as fast as they could. But when I started hand drawing everything for them, I saw that engagement go way up. I'd say to them at the end of the hour, what did we do today? We've never had a kid not be able to explain it back. If I walk them through the visual metaphor, and you'll see in a minute, these metaphors are pretty elaborate and they're reinforced with music, physical activities, but it just kept them engaged. And then, they could explain back to me in detail what the plan was. So, a lot of schools started using this as the behavioral plan for the IEP, classroom management, lots of different ways that it was used. But one of the first pictures that I drew is a picture here of this roller coaster that just talked about the ups and downs of life, that your decisions have consequences, that behavior A plus behavior B is going to equal consequence C. And the goal is to get them on that track to opportunity, freedom, self-respect. Me and Hans, we believe the answer to the question why try is if you try in life, you'll have more opportunity, more freedom, more self-respect. Hans, anything you want to say about that picture there?
Yeah, it's just helping them see how their choices today are having an impact on their future, and it's not a process. What's cool, you're seeing this as a completed version of it, but it kind of builds as you go. If you're doing it digitally, like like a PowerPoint deck or something like that, or you could have a printed version of this where you might be using this one-on-one with a student and walking them through it in a counseling session like Christian would use as a therapist or a counselor, either in a mental health setting or in a school setting. Um, and and so it can be a tool for one-on-one, but if you're doing it in a group or a class, often we'll have kind of a general discussion about this and ask these questions kind of in a general way as we go through it. But at the end, um, you've kind of processed this with them, and there's something really powerful about that where they kind of see through the metaphor what's going on in their life, and you're asking questions and they're telling you what's going on. You're not trying to tell them what's going on. And so it's really kind of one of the foundational pieces. And we're going to actually share this with all of you today. If you haven't ever tried this before, we have a free sample lesson of this metaphor specifically that is probably the most common one that we use. We want you to walk away today with this as a resource.
Yeah, this next one talks about tearing off labels. I had many of these labels growing up: failure, druggie, learning disabled, dumb, lazy, attitude problem, troublemaker. With this one, we partnership with the student in tearing off the labels, focusing on what's right with them. When you have a label, your motivation is going to be low. I can tell you a lot of those kids that don't want to come to school, I ask kids, what's one of the major reasons? It's sometimes it's how other kids are labeling them, how they feel judged. And this just helps them focus on what's right with them, not what's wrong with them. Anything else you want to add to that one, Hans?
Yeah, no, it's just that it's understanding that your labels impact your opportunities, and there's a lot of things that we end up getting labeled that are not fair, and it's a frustration. But if we can take a strength-based approach and help kids recognize what their positive attributes and help them see themselves, have a positive self-image, and project those things, that's what's going to help change some of those labels and open up the door of opportunities for them. And so with every one of these, we have 10 different units, and we'll show you kind of quickly what the different skills are that we're teaching, these resilient skills. But with every one of these units, we have the visual metaphor and that processing guide for how to facilitate that. We have activities that go along with them that range from object lessons to group activities to group movement activities. We have example stories and video clips that illustrate these so they can see a connection to how it would apply in their life. We have activities that involve art and music and journaling and a whole bunch of other resources so that we're trying to teach kids in ways that they like to learn. Because that was the big breakthrough for Christian and I when we first started working on this, was just this reality that when you just talk to kids, they're not going to engage. A lot of them aren't good auditory learners. But as we started this visual approach and saw how many kids would connect to that, it was so powerful. But then we added other resources with activities. One of the things that's so great about doing activities is they really engage all learning styles at once. And all of these are just kind of following what we've recognized over the last 20 years of working with some of the best educators in the country. What are the best practices for student engagement? With Christian's background, my background, and many of the other people that we have on our team that are incredible in their experience and knowledge of these things, as well as our customers and friends that we've consulted with around the country, some of the most amazing educators we've seen. My background's in digital media, visual arts, video gaming. And so I'm trying to take some of my experience in that and incorporate it into all of these things that we kind of embrace as some of the best practices for engaging the kids that we're working with and teaching them in ways that they like to learn. Here's the next one, Christian: defense mechanisms.
Yeah. When I was in school, the teacher would say, Christian, turn to page 130 and read out loud. I didn't know how to read, so I'd swear at the teacher or punch the kid next to me because I'd much rather be sent to the principal's office, for acting out behaviorally. Today I realize, why was I doing that? I wasn't controlling, had no control over my emotions. I didn't understand my emotions, the emotions of others around me. And,
Hard to regulate.
yeah, and when you can control your defense mechanisms, you have a huge advantage. You can argue that that's really what maturity is the ability to understand your emotions and your own defense mechanisms and why other people around you are doing what they're doing. And so this one's often used around bullying, anger management. This next one here is what I call the motivation formula. I look at life's problems being like water. Water can flood and do damage, or water can be channeled through dams and create electricity. In America, the last few weeks, we've seen far too much flooding. And so,
Amen to that.
too much. And so,
Actual flooding and with people.
yeah, Yeah, and so the first dam we want to put the problem through is the choice to use positive self-talk. We want them to tap into character and heart. That just means you go through the motions, you don't give up out of respect for other people who care about you, who you care about. We want them to tap into a passion, purpose, or interest, and then into a support system. You want to add anything there, Hans?
Yeah, we're gonna come back to this in just a minute. If you notice here on this picture, there's this section right here that says surrendering the one-up relationship. And there's a kid stuck here in the flood zone, and there's a life preserver being thrown to him. To become a lifeline for the students that we're working with that are struggling, or the youth or children that we're working with that are struggling and that are dealing with a lot of challenges at home, at school, with their friends. It takes sort of an approach that we recognized early on. It was something I was recognizing because Christian was a natural at it. And I think based on his background and his life experience, he really understands a lot of the kids that he's working with. I come from a very different background where I was very privileged, and I had, a lot of different challenges than what Christian had that make it, maybe I'm not as good through my life experience at understanding some of the things that the kids I work with that are struggling are going through. And so
Yeah.
I was trying to learn from Christian how to do what he does, and we came up with this approach. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes here. But this is about how we motivate kids and how we teach them to be intrinsically motivated in spite of their problems. And so that, in its nutshell, is having a resilient mindset. Recognizing that even though you got challenges, how you can use those as fuel for motivation and channel them in a positive direction.
This is a tribute to my home state of Maryland. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Old Bay Season. I know my friend there on the Eastern Shore in Ocean City, Maryland, is very this visual metaphor. But if you put a bunch of live crabs on, oh, there's the heart. If you put a bunch of live crabs in a pot, and hey, everybody from Maryland's giving hearts. If you put a bunch of live crabs in a pot and you don't put a lid on the pot, why can't the crabs get out of the pot? It's because the other crabs are reaching up and pulling them down. So I'll say, hey, your friends you're skipping school with, doing drugs with, fighting, running away, all they're doing is they're pulling you down. They're keeping you in the pot. A quick activity I do with this one is I'll tell the kids to blink twice. Instead of the crabs pulling each other in the pot, they're pushing each other out of the pot. It's just, how you look at the picture. And we all know positive peer support is the greatest thing in the world. And maybe Hans, maybe share a little bit of the questions written around the metaphor there.
Yeah, I love this one. We've got some really great little object lessons and things that we do to kind of illustrate this concept. But this is a common metaphor we use in sociology, how others pull us down in pressure situations. And so it's all about peer influence and relationships. And I think my favorite is question number 4 up here. We'll talk about how do friends or others affect you in positive and negative ways. And I like to kind of frame it by saying, what is a true friend? Give me the characteristics of a true friend. And we talk about that. They have my back. They're always there for me. And we go through all these things that, they're there to support me. They want what's best for me. And then we talk about, have you ever had a false friend? Somebody thought you was a friend, but they really turned out to be a false friend. And we talk about the characteristics of them. They're two-faced, they're backstabbers. They go through this, and it's like you can see the gears turning in their mind as you're having this discussion and you process with them. It's clear they're thinking about themselves, what kind of a friend they are, and what kind of friends they have. And we don't have to really talk about and challenge them on do you have good friends? They're thinking about it themselves. And then we have to kind of help them recognize the benefits of being in some of those negative situations, and the benefits of getting out. What will your future be like when you get out? And we always give them this warning at the end: if you try to get out, you're going to be attacked. Because in almost every situation, you see that when a kid wants to do more, they want to be better. We work with kids. We're trying to make improvements in their attitude towards school, and they are changing. But then their friends say, "Hey, let's take off, or let's skip school today, or let's skip this class and go get something to eat." And if they try and say, "No, I got to go to class," they're going to get attacked. Even by their good friends, they're going to get attacked. And so we try and prepare them for what is going to happen in their future, and what are some tools and strategies we can use to get out. So it's a great one. Peer influence and relationships.
Yeah, the other one, the crap pot. There's a lot of stuff around chronic absenteeism. When you see
Yeah.
the full lesson plan, you can really tie into chronic absenteeism with that one. I'm sorry, we're going through these really quick because of time. This is just a simple problem solving model. We have them right in the hurdle there, what problem they're dealing with. Again, it could be absenteeism, and then they have to identify the problem, create options, get help, take action, believe in change, and jump back up. So that one's very simple. The next one,
The only thing on this I would say that's important is just that if we like that motivation for me, we're investing so much time to help kids be motivated and to make change. But if they don't experience success along the way, it's really hard to be motivated. And so this is why the problem solving model is so important, because they often just don't know where to apply their effort and how to work towards experiencing some successes with challenges and problems that they have. And so we really focus on, you know, how we can build on even small successes that generate more motivation internally to keep trying and pushing and seeing progress be made for them. So it's a really important one.
Yeah, this one, it's kind of ties to my childhood. I spent a lot of time in school drawing mazes as a child when I didn't know what was going on. I was struggling academically. But anyways, this is a maze that just works through the words desire, time, and effort. When they get to the end and they finish the maze, I'll say to get through this maze, you had to have the desire to do it. You have to put the time in, you have to put the effort in. It's hard work. And I really help the student understand that hard work will take you much further in this world than just academic smarts. And I was a special ed student. I struggled I struggled in school. Then I was able to, have tremendous opportunities to travel around this country and speak, but it came from hard work. This next one here, they got to lift society's laws and rules. Um, the weightlifter is kind of buff on one side, he's weak on this side where the balloon is, because we all know if you lift a balloon all day long, you're not going to get stronger. But if you lift that weight, and that weight represents laws and rules, it's going to make you stronger. To talk to kids about laws and rules, they're usually resistant to it, but they know this is kind of a real principle, a true principle, that they have to lift that resistance. And then they've got to get plugged into a support system. Our goal is they get plugged into at least 3 of these: a parent or caregiver, positive friend, teacher, counselor, school official, positive mentor, and something that inspires and motivates them to do good, whatever that is. And then I'm going to have Hans share this one right here, seen over the wall. Go ahead there, Hans.
Sure. Yeah. So, this is kind of a summary of everything, and it's about having, the key concept of this is about having a vision of their future, helping them recognize how their choices today and everything that's going on may be challenges, but if they can follow these skills that we're teaching them, these steps, we can take these kids that are metaphorically, it's like they're standing in front of a brick wall, and help them get into this position where they're on top of the wall. Where they have the big view and they can see a vision of their future. And so as it relates to this topic of chronic absenteeism and student engagement and some of the struggles that we're seeing, I wanted to kind of use this as a way to sort of illustrate as a metaphor some of the things that we want to relate to this issue or this challenge. Chronic absenteeism is often a sign that students are disconnected, unmotivated, and unable to see the value of school. And so the Y-Try program, using this wall, kind of helps illustrate these challenges. Standing at the base of the wall, kids are blocked by obstacles, peer pressure, anxiety, home instability, making it more difficult to see a future beyond their struggles. And so the first step in helping students to move forward is how we work with them and form a relationship with them. When they feel seen, supported, and valued, we are we're able to engage them and motivate them. And that concept that we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, strengthening the one-up relationship, is kind of the key to our approach there on how we are able to build these relationships. And we're going to come back and talk about that in a second. I'm going to have Christian share a little bit on that. Once we get that relationship, that connection with the students where they know that we care about them, that we like them, then we take them through those steps where we're helping them climb to the top of the wall. And those are all those things we just reviewed with you. Improved decision-making, helping them see positive self-image and have positive labels that they project, emotional regulation, focusing on peer influence and relationships, problem-solving skills, hard work and determination, the importance of that, responsibilities and expectations, and support systems and relationship building. And if you could imagine a railing on here, that would kind of represent that motivation formula where we're helping them to have a resilient mindset. All of these things are getting them and equipping them to reach the top of this wall. That doesn't mean their challenges or struggles are gone and they disappear, but it gives them a broader perspective, helping them stay focused and keep moving forward despite those obstacles. And so resilience for us, isn't an achievement. It's not an end goal. It's our focus because it's a continuous process of growth for our students. And by fostering those strong relationships, helping make things more relevant, it puts them into that position where they have the ability to deal with their challenges, everything that's written on that wall, the struggles that they're experiencing in different areas of their life. And so we're providing a powerful framework to address chronic absenteeism and help students stay engaged in their education process when we're taking them through Why Try. The challenge for us, though, is that for a lot of kids, that relationship is where we're beginning with our ability to motivate and connect to them. When we teach the reality right, we often talk about challenges that kids have in school, and we'll say, what are some of your biggest challenges? The number one answer we hear is they'll say, my teachers don't like me. And whenever we do training, every time I'm training groups of educators, I'll talk about that with them. And I'll say, is that true? And they go, of course not, but sometimes maybe it is. And in my experience, I think the vast majority of educators do like their students. They do care. But if that's the number one thing that kids say when you ask that question, that's evidence of a problem that exists. And so for us, we're trying to focus on how we can foster those better relationships with students where they know that we care about them. It's very clear. There's so much research on positive teacher-student relationships. Education Week had an article last fall that said it shared a review of educational research analysis of 46 different studies found that strong teacher-student relationships are linked both in short and long term to improvements across nearly every metric schools value. Higher academic engagement, better attendance, improved grades, fewer disruptive behaviors and suspensions, and lower dropout rates. It impacts everything that we care about. It also impacts our teachers. We're seeing right now a massive shortage of teachers all across the country. Everywhere that we work, in every state, there's things that are being adjusted to make it easier to become a teacher, lowering some of the requirements for becoming teachers to try and encourage more educators to come into the system, because every school system seems to be short, classroom sizes seem to be getting bigger, and there's a tremendous level of burnout. That's why we love the summer for all of you. You get a chance to kind of refresh and regroup and hopefully, prepare for next school year to make it better. Research shows that this teacher's relationship with a student is the best predictor of how much a teacher experienced joy versus anxiety in class. And so its impact on teachers is equally important. And so for us, having a trusted adult in a student's life makes all the difference, right? And that relationship component is super important. Relevance is the other side for us when we talk about, the foundational point of what we're teaching. How are we making school relevant for them? How are we helping them see and engage with school, see how their choices today are having an impact? All those skills, like teaching the reality right or any of those metaphors that we're doing, go a long way as we process with them to help them see how their choices are having an impact today and moving forward, and how what we're learning in school matters. Sometimes we focus so much in education on trying to help students understand what they need to know to have success, to be able to score well on a test, or to be productive in what they're doing, moving through, a subject that we're teaching and trying to help them learn and master this knowledge. But so often we're not helping them because we're focusing on what you need to know. We don't help them see why you need to know this. How does this connect to you in your life? What's the relevance of this subject or this content that we're learning? And so that's why it's so important to involve social and emotional learning with academic content so that we're helping make those relevancy ties. It's one of the reasons why our program is called Why Try. We're helping kids see the why. The last part of relevance that's important for us, though, is in student engagement. Are we teaching them in ways that they like to learn? Do we use music? Do we use activities? Do we use stories and metaphors to help relate this content to them and help them see how these things reflect, in their life and how they're relevant to them. And are we using media and technology? Coming from a background in visual arts and in video gaming and technology, I try and embrace technology as much as possible. We also know, it's clear that in our world today, we are seeing a massive impact of how technology is impacting the mental health of our students and the role that it's playing there. And so, we need to embrace it, but we also need to be aware of the dangers and then utilize it in ways that are going to help us put it to use in a positive way. And that's, for us, we always just kind of come back to, are we teaching them in ways that they like to learn? For us, we refer to this as generational relevance. So those first two R's, relationships, which are the key to motivation, and relevance is the key to why, help plant the seeds for the third R for us, which is really like I mentioned before, it's our main focus. It's not really a goal that we're trying to accomplish, because resilience is something that everybody needs, and everybody has the ability to tap into. But, when kids are struggling, it's easy to understand, why the challenges they have cause them to shut down and give up. I can see that. I would struggle when I work with kids and I see what they're going through. I would probably struggle in the same circumstances. But I often see other kids in the same circumstance that have this ability to cope and thrive despite their challenges. And you often think, okay, well, why is it that one kid in this moment is doing great? They're thriving when another kid's shutting down. And it's clear one student has resilience in those moments when the other one doesn't. And is that something you're just born with, or is it something that you can teach? And so, we know it's something that we can foster and build in every student. You can teach and increase resilience if that becomes our main focus. It's not success, it's not failure. We're focusing on resilience, that inner motivation to not give up when things get difficult. And so that's why with the Why Try program, we're teaching all these skills to help put them in that position of resilience on top of the wall. But as we were working on this, and like I mentioned, this is typically used with your students that are really struggling in a tier 2, tier 3 approach in a multi-tier system. But, it's harder sometimes to incorporate this into a system where we're working at a tier 1 level with all students, because, your staff have to be involved and they have to be trained to be able to deliver this. And in an elementary setting, it makes more sense. It's a little harder in a secondary setting. It's usually provided as a support more in a tier 2 small group setting. If it is in a school, it's because there's been an adoption of this and they've gotten many of the staff trained, and they may be delivering it in a homeroom setting or something in a middle school or high school as a resilience education tool that you're using, to kind of establish sort of some framework for teaching this in a tier 1 level. But one of the things that we really recognized, especially even after COVID hit, was the need for us being better at making that connection with our students that is really so foundational. It's so important. And you all recognized it, in our survey, that the relationship that we have with our students is critical. And it kind of comes back, this is what I want to talk about, starting the one-up relationship. When I was talking with Christian one day, when we were getting ready to make that metaphor of the motivation formula, we were kind of talking about the idea that he was voicing his frustration to me because he was working with kids and they were dealing with a lot of difficult problems. And he said, I feel like I make progress with them. I don't know if you remember this, Christian. He's like, I feel like I make progress with them. And then they go home and they go back to their family or their neighborhood. And it's like all the progress goes out the window and I can't get rid of their problems. And I kind of remember laughing at him. I said, I may not be a social worker or have your background, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to get rid of their problems. And so we started saying, he's like, I know, but what can we do? And that's where we kind of created that motivation formula that talks about taking their challenge, their problem, and recognizing that there is fuel in the problem that you can channel in a positive direction for motivation. But to get them out of that flood zone, you have to be able to engage with them and become that lifeline to them. And that's what Christian was so good at. People would come into his office and he'd work with these kids, and they were giving him the hardest, most difficult kids to reach in this community mental health setting where he was working as a social worker. And so I remember asking him one day, what do you do when they come into your office? And you want to explain this to him, Christian, kind of why we called it this?
Yeah, yeah. I just noticed most of the kids I'm working with, they would see the probation officer up here, the judge up here. It could be their parents, their teacher, the counselor. Everybody's up here. They would see themselves down a little bit, one down. And the child's one down when they have tons of attitude, disrespect, because that's their fight. They're trying to kind of level that playing field, when they have tons of anger, tons of frustration. And so I just came up with this concept, just like, what if I surrendered the one up, and what are ways you can surrender the one up? So one of the first things I started to do is when kids came into my office is I had a really nice leather chair and a metal folding chair. I would sit on the metal folding chair and I'd put them in the nice, leather chair, and they'd sit in my leather chair, spin around a few times, have a little party in it. And then after about, 8 minutes or so, they'd say, hey, Mr. Moore, you should be in the nice leather chair. You're the LCSW. You write the letter to the judge or the probation officer. You're the expert. You should be in the nice chair. And I would kind of flip it on them and say, no, you stay in the leather chair. You've been the expert on your life, and I can't solve your problem. You're going to have to do the work and solve your problem. So you're the expert. You stay in the nice leather chair. So just symbolically surrendering that one-up relationship. And I noticed when I started doing that, engagement went through the roof. Court-ordered kids would show up even an hour early to counseling. Between our music and then surrendering the one-up relationship, our engagement with the visuals, the music, the physical activities, it was relevant to the students, but it was surrendering the one-up relationship that really
Made
got
that
them
connection.
engaged, made that connection. And then we started teaching teachers how to do it. And teachers would do all kinds of things, like when kids would walk into their classroom, they would stand at the door and, do a soul shake with them. And I would tell the teachers purposely mess up. If the kid says, hey, Mrs. Jones, with me, we do 2 high fives, I would say, mess up, don't remember. And then that way the student would be like, Mrs. Jones, with me, we do 3 high fives. And then the student is teaching the teacher before they even walk into the classroom. And so I started realizing, man, there's lots of ways we could do this. So me, Hans, and Bruce, now I don't even know how many we have, maybe 150 of these tools.
Lots,
Lots of these tools, I
yeah.
don't even know.
Well, and
But
and
go ahead, Hans.
like when we first started doing this, when Christian and I were working on this, he came up with about 20 different things that he would do in a one-on-one setting.
Yeah.
And then we realized, okay, a lot of those don't apply to a group or classroom setting as well. And so then we started looking at some of the best teachers that we were working with and training and taking observations and getting feedback and ideas, and this has been kind of a growing list, but we have a whole bunch of specific practical interventions on how we can surrender this one-up relationship with students and communicate to them that we care about them. I mean, at its core, for everything that Christian was trying to do, it was just making those kids feel value and feel like we care about them and that they're important. And and so when COVID hit, we would do workshops on surrendering the one-up relationship and leave behind a bunch of strategies with a whole staff of a school. And it was really great. It's a fun workshop that we would do. But at the end, as outsiders coming in and teaching them and equipping them, they'd be motivated for a couple months. But you know how it is. School gets busy. We've just got a lot of stuff on our plates, and it's very easy for something that we went through in a professional development at the beginning of the school year to have an impact short term, but then it kind of fades over time if it's not focused on continually. And if we as outsiders are coming in and introducing this, it can be fun and motivational, but then it doesn't seem to have the lasting impact that we wanted it to have. And so we created a workshop, and we realized we need to put this together. Like, why try as a toolkit for teachers and counselors and educators to work with kids? We wanted to put together a toolkit for administrators and school leadership teams to be able to deliver workshops and repeated focus on their staff at helping them be better at surrendering the one-up relationship and building and fostering those positive relationships with their students. Because like we said, everybody knows this is so important. It is foundational to student engagement, to everything that we care about and measure, but nobody talks about how to do it. Like, we know why, but we don't ever talk about how. And we realize, Kyle, this is what we're showing the how with surrendering the one-up relationship. Now we just need to get it into their hands and then keep it an area of focus that's driven from the leadership in the school or the organization. That helps change the culture. And I love this first workshop that we have because I feel like it creates insight in staff without making them feel guilty. We use, like Christian was sharing before, visual metaphors are our thing. Processing a metaphor helps you understand something that can be complex in a way that's easy to relate to for your own life, for your students. And in the same way with teachers and educators, we came up with a specific analogy that we use to kind of illustrate two different modes that we're in on a daily basis. We call it selfie mode. If you take a selfie with your phone, usually you're the subject with whatever's behind you, right? And so there are moments in our day where we're in selfie mode. We're focused on ourselves, and it's important. It's actually not a bad thing to be in selfie mode because we have to address our own needs, our feelings, and some of the preparation of things that we're doing on a daily basis to be able to be good at what we do and how we deliver our content to our students, how we teach a concept, how we prepare for a lesson that we're delivering, or how we're working with our students. And there's important parts of our day where we need to be in selfie mode. There's also, just like your phone, if you flip the camera to point away from you and focus it on somebody else, we call that portrait mode, where you're taking a picture of another person. When we're in portrait mode, as it relates to our work, moments when our focus is on our students, it's helping the students feel valued. It's building trust with the students and helping students feel accepted. And so all those skills that we're teaching in surrendering the one up are all the strategies that we're delivering with surrendering the one up are focusing on how to be present with our students and how to make those connections more effectively. And I like it because it creates insight, not just why positive teacher-student relationships are important, but it equips them with how to do it, how to create them. So we have this whole toolkit of resources that include the skills for teaching, or the resources for teaching that first lesson, along with a bunch of repeated follow-up workshops and lessons for your staff to have in a just a normal staff meeting. It could be in small team groups and PLCs. And it's important because it's not just that one and done professional development. It's something that you continue to use over time. And so we have these pre-built workshops that are a continuation of that first workshop, where we'll talk more about other ways to surrender the one up, digging even more deeper and more strategies for surrendering the one up. We have lessons that focus on trauma-informed strategies. We have to building relationships. We have improving relationships through self-awareness, and sorry, that went fast through those. Celebrating success, and another concept we call resilient listening. And then onto that, we are continuing to develop new additional workshops and resources that can be used to provide those supports and keep the conversation going to help kind of create a shift. And so it's what's important about this for us is that it's not a program that staff have to learn how to teach. You're not adding to their plate of things that are responsibilities that they have, or their growing list of responsibilities. And I feel strongly that it's a long-term approach to changing the culture of your school as we all improve our capacity to be better at connecting with our students, and has the potential to not only impact the way students feel about school, but to reduce staff turnover and improve job satisfaction. The burnout that we feel changes when we have those important relationships and connections. Christian, you want to say anything about that? Because that's something we learned about from COVID more than anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it changes that culture so much. I have students that will say to me, Mr. Moore, I know you care about me. And I go, how do you know I care about you? And they'll say, I've never seen anybody try this hard to reach me, to focus only on what's right with me. That's another tool you can use to, surrender the one-up relationship. Is when I was in a classroom doing some teaching, or when I even do, get invited to be in a classroom. I tell kids, hey, when you come into my classroom, I'm only going to focus on what's right with you. And what child doesn't want to be in an environment where they know the adult will just focus on what's right with them? Now, I got to warn you, sometimes kids will get worse if you tell them that, because they're going to test you. They're going to be like, well, no way, you're just going to focus on what's right with me. And if you can get through that hump there of them testing you, they'll run through a wall for you. And yeah, that's the main thing I want to emphasize there. But all of this stuff has a huge impact on attendance. It really, really does. And I think sometimes when we share this, it sounds so simple, but it really, we've seen this now in tens of thousands of school systems. That's what really improves attendance.
Yeah. I think it's the most effective way to improve attendance, student engagement, and reduce chronic absenteeism. It really just comes back to that whole human connection, the way we're forming positive relationships with them, and lays the groundwork for everything else to be much more effective. Um, so it's kind of us coming back to this metaphor here. When they can't see the relevance of school, they have no hope, they're disengaged. It's easy to be chronically absent and to not value school. But if we can help teach them those skills of resilience, and at the heart of it, begin with that relationship. If we could just have all of our staff, they don't have to know how to teach why try. You can use this with your chronically absent, really struggling students in a tier 2 and tier 3 setting, small groups and one-on-one. But if we could get the whole staff to be focusing on just here, try this today or try this today, just some simple little strategies that they can incorporate into their day-to-day routine that help them to be better at communicating that they actually care about their students, because they do. In their heart, they do. They're just not very good at communicating it outwardly to the students. That's been our experience. And I'm not a natural at it. I have to be intentional. Christian is much more natural at this than I am. Some of the other people in our team here are much more natural at this than I am. But I know when I can be intentional about this, I can be very good at making a connection with students. And when I get to work with them and teaching why try in a classroom environment, I really will follow those specific strategies. And I always think, oh, if I can do it, then anybody can do this. And that's one of my favorite things, is to be able to see how putting this in the hands of an educator, whether you're a natural at this or not, we all can be better at being intentional and communicating effectively to our students how much we value them and how much we care about them. And it's feeling valued and feeling that worth that makes the difference. So we want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat window. But we want to share with you some resources. We have a summary of information shared today. We also have a webinar series where this was more kind of sharing specifics about why try on our tools, but we do the Resilient Educator webinar series where we bring in different panelists from around the country that will come and join us for different topical webinars, not talking about why try, but talking about some of the challenges we're seeing, sharing strategies and best practices and advice and information and resources. And boy, we have a really great turnout for those. We get people from all over the country joining us. And we would encourage you, if you haven't tuned into any of those, to come see them. We're actually just finishing up an archive of those where we have, if you're looking for some summertime continuing ed, you need to get a certificate showing that you attended those. You can go watch them in a self-paced way, and then in a very inexpensive way, purchase a certificate for attending those, and you'll be able to submit that for continuing ed, at your state or district licensure body. We also have a podcast that is a kind of a combination of some of the stuff around our book, The Resilience Breakthrough, but also some of those webinar series that we've been doing that are available in podcast form. So if you're just driving in your car on a commute or something like that, and you want to catch up on some of these discussions, you can listen to it in podcast form. We have a parent guide to resilience, which is a great resource that goes along with our other program, the Resilience for Youth program, that is based off of our book, The Resilience Breakthrough. And again, we're going to do an event next week. If you want to tune in for that, we'll talk about some of the strategies that come from that theory of resilience in our book and how it relates and how we deliver it to students. And so we have a free parent guide to resilience that is a great resource that you can share. And then we'll share with you a free lesson plan on why try, so you can see a sample of the reality ride, how it's taught in a elementary. We go from pre-K all the way through 12th grade in an education setting for that. Why try is also a toolkit used in mental health counseling, in youth corrections, even in adult corrections. And so we have a free lesson plan showing how to use Why Try's reality ride in an elementary setting and in a secondary setting. And so if you fill out that QR code, we'll send you to a page with all those resources in there. And then if you want any more information, if you would like to know more about the Transformational Leader Toolkit, we'd be happy to schedule a demo with you. When you fill out this QR code, if you have interest, you can indicate it there, and we'll reach out and schedule a time where you can meet with one of our program directors, and they'll take you through, answer any questions that you have, show you how it works, what it costs, what the implementation looks like, and how it would be delivered and be able to be rolled out in a school setting. Or about Why Try or anything else that we talked about today, we'd be more than happy. Yeah, we'll send an email out for the resilience webinar next week. Riss, you were asking that question. So you'll get an email just from having attended this. We'll send an email out to you with information about next week. It'll probably be, the first one will go out tomorrow. So we'll share a resource with you there. We also have another webinar next week on, oh gosh, what's the title? It's, we have one of our community partners that's going to be on with us and talking about, oh my goodness, here, let me pull it up. Any other questions, Christian? Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, again, we're gonna have that resilience. You're talking about the resilience workshop next week, Hans?
Yeah, we've got, yeah. So we were talking about that, and we've got another one. We've got two next week, actually. And so I was pulling up the second one.
Yeah, so definitely, yeah, we'll send that out to everybody. And I'm going to be speaking on resilience. We'll go a lot more in depth on resilience. And by the way, since you have me and Hans here, if anybody has any other questions, just put them in the chat window. We can stay on for a couple more minutes in the chat window.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
I want to thank everybody for being here.
I'm going to stop sharing that just for a second. I'll share our information on our other one that we've got next week. So on the 23rd, we've got this one, Creative Restorative Practices in Action with Why Try. And so this is going to be Bruce Bushnell and Christian and Gerald Robinson, who is an expert in this field, and he's going to be sharing some strategies and resources where he works at Doral Academy in kind of the Vegas area in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then on the next day, on the 24th, we've got another one coming up. That is this one on engage, motivate, and build resilience, need the most difficult to reach students. And Christian's going to be sharing more details about our resilience breakthrough book and our resilience for youth materials and how we're teaching the sources of resilience. Why Try, we always talk about, teaches the skills of resilience, and Resilience for Youth teaches the sources of resilience. So we'll send an email out with information about both of these workshops. If you're interested in coming and attending those, you're welcome to join us. We'd love to have you. And you can share these with anyone that you want. We'll also send a recording of this one today. Tomorrow we'll send out an email with a recording and a link to this. So if you have anybody that you want to share this with, or if you wanted to go back and see something that we shared today, you're welcome to do that.
You got any QR code you need to put up, Hans? Or are you good there?
We were just on, I'll go back to it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for staying on this long. And we really appreciate all you do for students. Right now in education, there's no more important time than to be a teacher, a counselor, an administrator, that you're doing the most important work on this planet. And so you guys are my heroes. We'll stay in the fight with you. We all got to fight together right now for students. And it's just so important, so important. I wish I could take you all on the road with me, and just it's fascinating to see education across this country. So it's not easy times, but important times.
Andrea, you said, can you get a copy of the slide deck? I'll reach out to you, Andrea, and see if we can support you with what you need to be able to pass this along and share it with them. We'd be happy to as well if you want. Maybe the easiest thing is we can either send them a link to this webinar, or we'd be happy to do a live demo with your admin and explain any of these things to them just over a quick Zoom call with them, if that's helpful.
Yeah, reach out to us if you want me to do I can do a 1 hour presentation on resilience. If you want to get any of your team together, I can do that as well. You can just coordinate that through Hans. Just
Yeah.
the QR code was the best way for them. Probably get a hold of you just at Hans at YTry. Hans at ytry.org, HANS at YTry.
That sounds great, Andrea. I'll reach out to you and we can talk a little bit more details about your situation. Yeah, if any of you are interested, Christian would be more than happy to do a little resilience workshop for free, virtually. If you guys are interested, you want to get a group together in your school or district, we would be happy to do that. So let us know and we'll give you a call.
Perfect.
Thanks, Karshia. Tim, thanks. Good to see you.
Is that Tim?
Yeah,
Nolan?
Tim Nolan.
Tim Nolan's in the house? Holy cow.
Yeah, Tim was on watching with us.
No idea.
Tim, I liked your answer to the question at the beginning of, what's your favorite thing this summer you've got to do, and that's swimming. I'm just picture Tim out swimming.
Tim Nolan's one of my mentors. He's one of my heroes. He's about as close he's done what I've done. He's just a little older than me his whole life. So he's definitely one of my mentors.
Tim is a walking model of resilience.
Yeah.
If you know Tim, and you know some of the challenges he's had and he's gone through, he is inspirational to say the least.
Real deal there.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, John. 81 and still having fun. I like that, Tim.
Yeah.
I saw your email earlier today, Tim, and I know what you're doing right now. So
very cool.
I'm glad you could join us. All right, I think we're running out of questions and comments here.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. If there's anything else you have or any questions you need answered, we'd be happy to answer them for you. And otherwise, hopefully you're able to fill out that QR code form that links to, and then we can follow up with you from that if you indicate, any questions or things that you'd like to have answered. Otherwise, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you can join us next week. And please share it with anybody else that you think would be interested in getting involved and coming to see what they're going to be presenting on next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.